Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season two of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me professional wrestler Ryan Nova, who has wrestled for Ring of Honor, New Japan, and Camp Leapfrog, to name a few. So, welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, I'm happy to be here. Thanks Andrew for having me on. I'm looking forward to having a nice little conversation about wrestling and maybe Sonic the Hedgehog. We talked a little bit about this beforehand, but maybe that'll come up too.
Yeah, you never know when Sonic the Hedgehog or Shadow will ever appear in any of my interviews now, and that's because of Killian McMurphy. So, if you're not a fan of that, go tweet at him and not at me. But I am stoked to have you on, and I'm very excited because obviously I've seen you in Camp Leapfrog, I've seen you in a little bit of Ring of Honor, and I do want to talk a lot about that. But
Mhm.
before we get into all of that, I am curious how you got into wrestling because you are about 5, 6 years in at this point.
Yeah, so as far as wrestling is concerned, I'm about actually in March this month was my 4-year anniversary in as far as wrestling matches is concerned. It's going to be 5 years since I started training in August coming up. But so how I got into wrestling, I mean, my story is not overly unique or different from a lot of people. From a very early age, I had a chaotic, kind of home life growing up. I experienced a lot of stuff going on in my personal life. Like my parents got divorced at a very young age. Unfortunately, I had a family member pass away from cancer around the same time, and I had was in therapy for all that stuff and got diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, which they said was a reaction to everything kind of falling apart. It's a reaction of trying to regain control over things that are just kind of out of your control, right? And professional wrestling was one of the things that was in my life that provided me with an escape to get out of this life that was kind of crumbling all around me at the age of like 5 6 years old. And I would just turn on the television and I would watch wrestling, sit in front of the TV, and for like 1 to 2 hours at a time. There was no divorce, there was no cancer, there was none of that stuff. It was just two guys, two girls going in there just beating the hell out of each other, trying to decide like who's the better competitor here. And like there was something magical about that. Obviously, you have the pomp and the circumstance, but just the pure athleticism and the wrestling together. There's something so beautiful about that that cannot be replicated in any other facet of life, in my opinion. And I got started in wrestling. Like over time, my passion for wrestling just kept growing. A lot of people I think are wrestling fans at one point or another, but I think they fall out of it because they move on or they go on to something else. But it just grew for me as I learned about the different styles, all the different companies that were out there. And then one day I just decided to myself, I was like, you know what? Like, I love this so much. And I think I should take a chance on myself and see if I could do this. And I had known about Ring of Honor a little bit around that time period, but I had gone to Ring of Honor's Final Battle 2015 show in Philadelphia, PA, at the 2300 Arena, famous wrestling venue. I'm sure everybody's aware of. And I saw that show, and I knew that I was seeing the best wrestling on the planet. And I just thought to myself, "This is so awesome." I was watching AJ Styles and Jay Lethal in the main event for the world title, and I was like, "This is this is so cool. This is awesome. I need to be a part of this, or at least I need to try to be a part of this." And then I decided later on, like, I didn't want to live my life waking up years from now thinking, what would have happened if I had just taken a chance on myself and gone for it? So I signed up for the ROH dojo when I saw a flyer online for it, started training on my 21st birthday, and the rest after that was history. So that's a very long-winded explanation for you, but I wanted to give you context as to where it was coming from.
And let's talk about that because obviously Ring of Honor's dojo is a premier training place. You know, it's well respected all over the world. And so, what was that like coming into that? And obviously, being a fan of Ring of Honor and understanding what Ring of Honor is, and understanding how they do things, and understanding, Ring of Honor, MCW, and there's a few others that definitely WWE and I would imagine AEW and a few other promotions have their eye on. I mean, New Japan has their eye on Ring of Honor
Mhm.
collectively, as well as Ring of Honor has its eye on Ring of Honor as well. And so,
Yeah.
what was that like coming in and the mentality saying, there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of good wrestlers here, there's a lot of wrestlers that come into this and then get really developed well, and really
Mhm.
having that, I guess, mindset, or did you have that mindset at all?
Yeah, so my mindset coming into it was obviously it was very stressful, and the weight of knowing that I was going to be training at this Ring of Honor dojo, this place that had this legacy, had this standard to live up to. It was a little bit overwhelming because I had known how many people had come through it. So many people had either been students there or had been trainers there, like Rhett Titus, Cheeseburger was there, Will Ferrara, Delirious, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, all those people at one time or another had been a part of that school. So it had a very rich history to it. And, that was weighing on my mind very heavily. And it was really stressing me out because I was like, oh my God, like I have to show up and try and be as good as all of those people, so I can live up to the name of this school. There's a reputation that people know Ring of Honor to have. So I showed up on my first day. I had no idea what to expect. And I just thought I was about to go into the dojo and meet some guy in a suit who was, like going to be the person like running the school. I didn't know what to expect. Like I was like, it's going to be some guy in a suit, just like meeting me at the door, talking to me about the school. And the first person that opens the door is Will Ferrara and then Cheeseburger are both there, and they're the ones that interview me to get to know me, my personality, talk to me about my aspirations in wrestling. And I had just seen these guys like live, like on a show, Ring of Honor show, like less than a year earlier. So I was like, this is so weird. Like I'm actually seeing these people like in person, because that was the first experience I ever had with seeing a wrestler like in person, like actually talking to them as a human on a human level. So it was crazy. And, you know, they made me feel very comfortable, made me feel very welcome. And on the first day I showed up to training, I expected it to be like me and like 20 other people. So I thought I was going to get lost in like a sea of other guys and girls trying to make it at this. And I ended up being the only one that had signed up for the new class. So it was just me who was there. And like the pressure just intensified even more because I was like, all eyes are on me now. So I really have to show up. I'm not going to be able to blend into the background. And they really whipped my butt into shape, I'll say. Delirious, Will Ferrara, and Cheeseburger, who all trained me from the ground up. So it was a surreal experience to say the least.
And obviously, there's a physical aspect of training, of actually understanding the move sets, being safe, getting into physical shape. And
Hmm.
the thing that I like about wrestling is more the mental side, the psychology of
Hmm.
wrestling, how to sell, how to build a match, how to build a story. And obviously, we're going to talk about Camp Leapfrog, which I think really gets the mental side of wrestling
Oh yeah.
correct a little bit later. But what was that like in your training on both of those things? Because wrestling to me, and I view wrestling different because I'm a big comic book guy, and I
Hmm.
view wrestling very much like a comic book where you have to, have some action stuff, but you also have to set the entire psychological scene
Hmm.
up in that. And that's how I view wrestling. And I understand that I'm coming at it from a different angle than other people might be coming at it, but I view more wrestling as a story. And if you don't have that psychological stuff, and we're starting to see that with certain promotions that they don't know how to tell good stories. So what was that
Hmm.
like in your training to really capture that?
Yeah, and that was one of those things that I had not been privy to really prior to coming into wrestling. Like I think a lot of people, who are really heavily invested in wrestling, the quote unquote like smart fans, they have a good understanding, I think, of what kind of goes into wrestling, but I don't think that they really can grasp the full weight of what goes into a structured wrestling match, just because they haven't been like in the actual like system and they haven't actually like gone through it themselves. I think that there's something that, you know, the experience of doing that is something that can't be replicated by like studying it like through tape or like studying it by watching it on TV. Um, but when I found that the psychology of it, the story of it, knowing each of the intricate little pieces of a match and what goes into making a fully structured match work, psychologically speaking, was fascinating to me because in school, like in college, I was studying psychology, and I always loved psychology and like the study of human behavior and the human mind. And to me, this kind of translated well into wrestling, was that yeah, like there are these intricate little mechanisms and pieces that perfectly connect together to make what you see on television actually work and actually resonate with people and connect with them on a human level. I think that the story aspect that you're talking about is incredibly important because everybody can relate to emotion, everybody can relate to struggle, everybody can relate to feeling that the sweet taste of like victory, whether you're 5 years old as a child or a 95-year-old grandparent or something like that. Everybody can relate to story. It's like you said, like a comic book, like a movie, like a television show. Those are the things that we connect with and that resonate with us on a personal level. And I don't think wrestling is any different. So to me, I agree with you. The athleticism is awesome and it's definitely a very valuable piece of the equation. But there's nothing that can make up for not having that story component there. If it's not there, I think that you're lacking something very fundamental and very vital to a successful wrestling match.
I mean, I think the perfect example is that, and I love Stone Cold Steve Austin. I think everybody does,
Hmm.
but I don't think Stone Cold Steve Austin is the most athletic wrestler on the planet. But I think he's one of the best storytellers because when he's flicking off Vince and
Hmm.
basically attacking his boss and drinking a beer and then stunning his boss, I think everybody who has ever worked from the ages of 16 all the way up to the ages of 80 plus can
Yeah.
understand that they have a difficult boss and how many times do you want to flick off your boss. Even if you have a good job and you like where you work, you can understand that. And even if you are now the boss, at some point you had a boss that you wanted to flick off. And
Hmm.
so when we talk about that story is immortalized in wrestling because
Absolutely.
that story put over the entire thing. It wasn't the athleticism. Not saying Stone Cold Steve Austin isn't athletic, but if we put AJ Styles and Stone Cold Steve Austin next to each other, one of them is more athletic than the other by definition.
Hmm.
But one of them is an amazing storyteller and is arguably the best storyteller. So I think that's the thing that really drives wrestling. And we're starting to see that there are some stories that are happening right now in WWE that are really good, and there's other things that are lacking and need that story makeover because the athletic talent is there. It's just that there's not a story there. And I think it's super important that people don't understand how psychology matters. And I think wrestling fans are starting to get a lot smarter with that.
Oh, sorry, we just had a connection break for 1 second. Could you just repeat the
Well,
last sentence
I
that you
think I
had?
think wrestling fans are now starting to get a lot smarter with that psychology, and they want that now in wrestling, and it's super important. And I think Camp Leapfrog, which I'm going to table that for 1 second here,
Hmm.
but I think that's what Camp Leapfrog is delivering in many ways.
Yeah, I'll agree with you quite a bit. I mean, I know we're going to talk about Camp Leapfrog in a little bit, so I'll wait for you to initiate that part of the conversation because I really can't wait to talk about that. But yeah, I agree with you in the sense that like you use the example of like comparing AJ Styles to like Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? And I think that I don't like doing the not that I'm saying that you did this, but my personal philosophy is like, yeah, I don't like to compare the two wrestlers together just because they both have their strengths and they're both very excellent at what they do. AJ Styles is, in my opinion, one of the best wrestlers of all time. He's one of the wrestlers that inspired me to, kind of chase the dream. One of those guys. Stone Cold Steve Austin, yeah, maybe not the most athletically naturally like gifted talents, not to say he's not athletically gifted, he obviously have to be to some degree to wrestle, but
Yeah.
Stone Cold Steve Austin had his own strengths as a wrestler, as an athlete, and he amplified that and used that to his advantage, and obviously successfully so, because became one of the most successful wrestlers, one of the most popular mainstream wrestlers
One
of
of the
all
most
time.
important stories in wrestling ever. It is
Absolutely.
flicking off Vince because you think WWE, that is synonymous with WWE, is Stone Cold Steve Austin drinking a beer, flicking off Vince, and then stunning him.
Hmm.
It's one of the top 10 moments in wrestling history in that WWE's company by far. And anybody who says otherwise, and again, I'm not knocking AJ Styles, I'm not knocking
Hmm.
Stone Cold Steve Austin,
Of course.
but this idea that, that psychology, I think that is the perfect example where that story wouldn't have made sense if he didn't flick off Vince. And it's that
Mhm.
psychology and that relatability because everybody in a wrestling ring lives vicarious. The fans live vicariously through. I think
Yeah.
that's super important to understand the psychology of wrestling more so than the athleticism, because
Hmm.
unfortunately, we have sports. We have football, we have basketball. Athleticism is collectively around, people in the United States, and it's very accessible. So, and that's not to knock wrestling. I can't wrestle. I can't do what any wrestler does. but it's that story that makes me want to believe and get behind somebody.
Mhm.
And then you put that athleticism in there, and then that's what brings it to the next level.
Yeah, and I think that two things that I wanted to bring up to kind of piggyback off your point is that with the whole Stone Cold thing, I think it's definitely important to give props to Stone Cold Steve Austin, but you also have to give props to Vince McMahon, who was the perfect foil for the Stone Cold Steve Austin character and gave him the great evil villain to play off of. You don't have that great story with Stone Cold and Vince McMahon without Vince McMahon's contribution to that story. And I think that that's something that you can talk about in wrestling in general is we need the story, we need the psychology because that's what people really relate to the most. And that's what people really connect with the most, even more so than any kind of athletic contribution. And in wrestling in general, you know, it's the forces of good versus the forces of evil. And that's a story as old as time itself. And that's a story that people will be able to relate to as long as humans exist on this planet. So I just wanted to bring that up about Vince because I think it's definitely important to highlight his contribution as well. But the other thing too about other sports that you brought up in comparison to wrestling that I think is super cool is that when we're talking about psychology and storytelling, wrestling has this aspect to it that these other sports don't have. They've obviously, like you said, got the athleticism, this competition between two teams to see who the better team is. But wrestling has this advantage over that, this strength that we can play off of and amplify it. We have the storytelling component to it. We have the psychology storytelling component to it, like I just said, and we should take advantage of that because that's something unique to this industry that other industries don't have in the athletic realm. So why not make the most out of it and amplify it to the biggest extent possible?
And I think the closest thing, and they legitimately copied wrestling, is UFC, where
Mhm,
they have those promos and they have the weigh-ins and they set up that little bit of storytelling. And they've clearly copied wrestling on that.
mhm,
But you can't copy the same way because you're not having a weekly fighting UFC fight. I mean, I think that would be crazy, especially with the way the guys hit each other. You know,
mhm,
people would be dead within like 3 years. But even at those weigh-ins and things and those show-offs and how they're standing like face to face with their gloves up, I mean, and then you have promos and things being dropped purposely at a very high resolution and things like that. I mean, that's straight out of wrestling. So
mhm,
clearly, wrestling has been copied by. Also, boxing does it as well. But speaking about Ring of Honor, because I do want to get into this, one
mhm,
of your first matches in Ring of Honor was against Cody Rhodes.
mhm. Yeah.
And that's a crazy circumstance where you're relatively brand new in it.
Mhm,
Cody is the world heavyweight champion. Obviously, this is for the championship. And
yeah.
how did all of that come about? Because obviously, we all know where Cody Rhodes is.
Mhm,
AEW. This was prior to AEW. Cody just left WWE and pretty much was doing his big four tour. Because I think he
yeah.
was that year. He did WrestleMania. He did Bound for Glory. He did, I think, Final Battle, or I forget the big Ring of Honor one. And then he did a big
Mhm,
New Japan show. And he's like the only guy in wrestling who's done all four shows in a year. And
mhm.
so, what was that like being new, getting to work with Cody Rhodes, getting to share a ring with Cody Rhodes where he is, getting that experience that, I don't want to like honor, I guess is a good one. Also, learning and just being in the ring collectively because it's a crazy circumstance.
Hmm. Yeah, it was one of these crazy moments that, like, I think about it now and it still doesn't feel like something that actually happened. It's one of those things that, like, somehow the stars perfectly aligned to create and make this situation even possible. And I'll get into the kind of the whole story and why it's such a special moment to me. But basically, what had happened is I was about a year into training, a little bit over a year, and I had been with Ring of Honor, kind of traveling with them, doing the shows, doing the ring crew, you know, the streamers, and you know, all the security positions, all the stuff that the ring crew guys do on every single show, which is obviously a very important spot. So I'm very grateful for all the people who fill that role and perform those jobs because those shows would not exist without those people for sure. But so basically, like I said, I was doing that for a little bit, and then Ring of Honor was coming to, oddly enough, back to the 2300 Arena in Philadelphia in October of 2017. And I was just told by my trainer I was like, they said to me, "Yeah, you're gonna wrestle Cody Rhodes," and I was like, "Excuse me?" Like I had to like clean my ear out because I was sure that I heard something wrong. But they were like, "Yeah, you're gonna wrestle Cody Rhodes. It's gonna be for the Ring of Honor World Championship," and I was just like, all right. I didn't even know how to process that. It was one of the craziest things that I had ever been told. I was like, me? Like, you're talking about me. Like, somebody who's barely even into this. I haven't hardly had any matches. I think it was like 3 or 4, maybe 5 matches deep at the most. And they were like, yeah, you're going to wrestle Cody and it's going to be for the title. And it's going to be in Philly in the 2300 arena. And I was like, just taken aback by it because that was such a special moment for me because Cody Rhodes was somebody that when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I was watching this guy on TV every single week on WWE programming. And, I watched that guy grow up with his career. I saw his very first match on TV, like against, I believe it was Randy Orton. And I had followed his career for so long. I was a fan of his, and then to be told I was going to stand in the ring with somebody that I had looked up to as a child, as a teenager, somebody who also inspired me in some way, shape, or form, was one of the craziest, surreal, magic moments that I've ever experienced in wrestling up to this point. And the fact that it was going to be for the Ring of Honor World Championship, no less, a championship that has such a history, a rich history of prestige and legacy with all of these amazing wrestlers and athletes just holding that title and elevating it, making it mean something. It was like a perfect storybook moment. You really can't replicate that. You really can't write that outside of like, a fantasy novel or a story. And I knew that I had a responsibility because I was going to be in that role and it could have been anybody, but it was me. I had to try and go in there and make it the most memorable kind of match or moment that I could, not just for me, but for the people who were going to be there because I knew they weren't there to see me. They didn't even know who I was, but I had to make sure somehow that they felt like they had gotten their money's worth or that it was entertaining to them in some way, shape, or form. So Cody was doing the ring gimmick at the time where he would make people kiss the ring of honor. It was actually called the Ring of Honor he had on his finger. And he presented it to me. And instead of kissing it, I took it a little bit step further and kind of, did something a little gross with it. I'm not going to explicitly say what it was, but people can go back and find it if they really want to know. And yeah, it was really cool. I didn't come out on top. I didn't win the Ring of Honor World Championship, but I feel like I made a moment out of that for myself. People after that show knew who Ryan Nova was a little bit, and sharing that moment with Cody, somebody who was so supportive of me behind the scenes and who was such a decent guy to me that whole time, all the way through, it was very special.
So to even talk about this, because the way I viewed this match, and I might be in the minority in how I viewed it, but I thought this was very much giving you credibility, giving you a boost, giving you that leg up. And while you didn't win the match, the fact that you're in the ring with Cody Rhodes, and I mean this no offense, but at this point you're not known.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows Ryan Nova at this point. But
Yep.
after this match, people started to pay attention because now you have legitimacy. You prove that you can hang with somebody of a Cody Rhodes caliber, that you could hang in a title match, that it's a big deal, that you're at that. I don't want to say you're climbing to that level,
Mm-hmm.
and that you now just brought a fight to somebody, and that also you made a moment and you created that disrespectful thing. And I'm not going to say it either
Mm-hmm.
because people can go see it. I want people to go see this match. So what was that like? Really getting the ability in him to give back to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately, I find in this industry there are two types of people: people who've made it and they give back, and this applies across a lot of industries. It's not just wrestling. And there are people who have made it who then want to keep taking more and don't want to give back. And this seemed very much like a give back type of moment, saying, hey, you're a young kid who is climbing it, and Cody at this point has done a lot of stuff, and he still has a
Absolutely.
lot left in the tank. But it was almost his obligation to give you that little boost so they could get to the next level, and then the next level, and the next level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a really humbling moment for me. And honestly, it was really cool to see somebody like Cody, this big star, came to Ring of Honor from the WWE, and he was on the best run of his career up to that point. Obviously, he had something to prove to the wrestling world at large that, he was every bit the man that he claimed to be, and every bit the performer that he believed that he was. So for him to allow that moment to help elevate me in a way, to give me the chance to set the foundation for the rest of my career, it was something that I'll always be grateful to him for. And it's something that I'll never forget. And I think that that's honestly one of the things that helped me develop the mindset of, I want to give to people in this industry, and I want to try and give back as best I can to people in this business, because it's a business that it's not about any one particular person. It's about all of us. And, we're all, in a way, we're all a team, and we should be working to help build each other up as a team. And it all kind of started for me right then and there with Cody, because somebody like him, this big star, this, to me, this larger than life person, when I was a kid, did that for me. And he didn't have to. He was under no obligation to do that. I was just somebody nobody knew. And that story going into that match wasn't even about me. It was to build a program between him and Dalton Castle, who was his opponent going into Final Battle that year. And Cody and Dalton and everybody involved allowed me to have a little part of that story, and to allow myself to create a moment for myself that people would remember afterwards. And that really was the perfect way to set the foundation for the rest of my career. And it didn't have to be that way, but I'm grateful to everybody involved that allowed it to be that way.
And let's talk about that foundation, because obviously, as this match was going on around this time, you then started teaming up with Eli Olsum, and that formed a tag team. Then that tag team eventually evolved with Cheeseburger into trios tag team work. And I'm just going to go through a bunch of names here. So before I go through a bunch of names, obviously, how did you and Eli meet? And then how did Cheeseburger get into that mix? Because obviously, I think this is the bulk of Ring of Honor, and gave you a lot of credibility, because you and Eli were a pretty dominant team, and you and Cheeseburger and Eli were also extremely dominant in the trios section of Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was hoping that we would get a chance to talk about this, because this is honestly one of the biggest highlights for me, the most special time in my career. I do have to correct you on one thing. It is actually Eli Isom, not Eli Osum.
Isom, okay.
I feel it's not your fault. I feel bad for him, but like, it seems like a recurring running joke that in his career, it's been hard for people to pronounce his last name. And like, even when we've been at shows and stuff, like, he's told people in advance how to pronounce his name, and then when he gets called to the ring for his entrance, they still pronounce it a different way. I've heard a million different ways that people have pronounced that, like Osam, Osame. One time it was even pronounced Eli Islam. I have no idea how that happened, but I feel bad for him. But I think that he would kill me if I didn't take the opportunity to just correct that little
I
thing.
stand corrected. I'm
But
the first person who could stand corrected.
I appreciate you just giving me the little platform just to do that. But so in regards to that, yeah, I mean, after the match with Cody, I wasn't really doing much of anything at all. I was just kind of, there in the background, not really anything going on for me. And then I teamed up with Eli. And the thing that was really special about that is that about 6 months after I had gone to the Ring of Honor dojo, Eli showed up. And he and I have almost been trained together from the ground up, from scratch. I was there obviously a little bit before him, but essentially we were, groomed and bred in the Ring of Honor dojo together. So we did everything together. Our careers almost took a parallel trajectory up to that point. And he wasn't really doing anything. He had debuted in Ring of Honor too, but we linked up. We were linked up together, two ROH dojo students. We were told to just go out there, and we wrestled a lot of the dark matches. We were curtain jerking a lot of the time. Just two kids going out there, like a part of this world, a part of this like crazy experience that, it was really sink or swim, and we really had to learn and adapt on the fly, or else we were gonna sink. We were fighting every single night that we had a match together to keep our heads above water. And I think that we definitely showed, and we definitely proved to people that even though we were a couple of young kids, that we had this fire in our guts and in our hearts for this business, this passion for Ring of Honor, and that we weren't going anywhere. We were going to keep taking our wounds, taking our licks, and we were going to keep coming back over and over and over again and asking for more, no matter what. But yeah, eventually we did the tag team thing for a little while. And then Cheeseburger, our trainer, obviously one of my best friends in wrestling, one of Eli's best friends in wrestling, like a brother to us, we decided, Ring of Honor has this 6-man tag team division. And there's kind of this hole there where there's not a lot of teams there. And if we joined up together, if we joined forces, we could really carve out a spot for ourselves there. And so we decided, yeah, you know what? We're going to go for it. Just 3 friends, 3 brothers. What do we have to lose? Let's just go for it. Maybe we can make this into something cool, maybe into something special. And yeah, we teamed up together and we wrestled some of the biggest names in Ring of Honor at the time. We wrestled guys like the Briscoes, guys like Dalton Castle and the Boys. We wrestled the then team Lifeblood, Mark Haskins, Tracy Williams, PJ Black, Villain Enterprises. So we wrestled a lot of guys and we were in there with a lot of people fighting for our lives every single match because we didn't know if we were going to get another one. And we rode that wave of just 3 friends trying to make a name for themselves as a trio, all the way to Madison Square Garden, where we ended up having a moment to ourselves on stage. And I looked out and I saw 15,000 people looking back at us, the Shinobi Shadow Squad. And that was one of the coolest moments of my entire life, being able to share that with 2 people that are my 2 best friends in wrestling, 2 of my best friends in wrestling, and brothers, like family to me.
Yeah, and obviously, I think you just mentioned a bunch of names where you obviously Villain Enterprise is a big name. Dalton Castle and the Boys is
Mhm.
another big name. Obviously, you got to wrestle Anthony Green, Brad Hollister, and Brad Johnson. That's another big name to throw out
Mhm.
there. And I love AG.
Me too.
If Everett was on, AG was on twice to this show. So obviously that's a big name given where people are at. And so, what was it like getting to wrestle some of the best that Ring of Honor had to offer, and really getting to wrestle all these different teams? And also, what was it like to be in a 6-man, tag match? Because trios is very different than a regular tag match, and you got 3 guys, and there's different offense, and it's a very different concept, and it's a really cool concept. And we've seen teams like Chris Daniels, Kazarian, Scorpio Sky do really well in this, and obviously that has translated over into other companies. SCU,
Yeah,
AEW is a big deal, and so obviously, what was that like? And those guys came straight out of Ring of Honor. So what was
absolutely.
that like to be in this division that really had a lot of hype and had legacy built into it?
Yeah, it was really awesome to be a part of something like that because like you said, it was a division that although it had only been around for a short amount of time, there had been so many teams comprised of so many amazing wrestlers, guys that we looked up to in a way that had held those 6-man tag team titles or were staples in that division. Like you said, guys like SCU, guys like the Kingdom, guys like the Bullet Club. They had the Young Bucks, Page, Cody Rhodes also held the titles at one point, and that was really awesome because we saw there that there was an opening for us. There was a lot of teams, big name teams in there that were already kind of established, but we thought to ourselves, if we slide in there, then maybe we'll get to wrestle those guys, those teams, and maybe we'll get to make a name for ourselves being in there with them. And that was kind of our mindset going into it, was that we're 3. I mean, obviously Berger is like world famous at that point still. He's a veteran, has been in the business a long time even at that point. But Eli and I were 2 relatively people just unknown, really were very inexperienced in Ring of Honor. And with Berger kind of at the helm, like by our side, we said, this is how we're going to get experience and this is how we're going to prove ourselves in Ring of Honor, is by inserting ourselves into this division, and we're going to wrestle all of these guys, and we're going to essentially learn on the job, which is what we had to do because we needed to prove that we belonged there, because we had been thrown into the fire at an early tenure in our careers, and there was no opportunity to just get our training in and just build in those reps. We had to get the reps in while we were wrestling all these people. So it was a little stressful at times, but it was also a really good learning experience that I'm very grateful for because I think it upped our game quite a bit. Not just Berger, but Eli and myself tremendously. And I think it's one of the reasons why Eli is in one of the positions that he's in now. I think it's the reason why I've been able to do as many things as I've been able to do in wrestling and in Ring of Honor. But like you talked about with the different style of six-man tag team wrestling, that was also something that we were learning and developing and sharpening through each match that we had because none of us had been in a six-man tag team at that point. Berger had been in tag teams before, but none of us had any experience being a six-man tag. So we were literally, wrestling on the road for Ring of Honor, developing our offense, developing our entrance, developing our six-man tag team style. And we were at the Ring of Honor dojo in between all of those shows, practicing our techniques, practicing our different strategies, literally trying new things and saying, oh, well, now we can try this on the road at the next show and see how it goes. So it was a lot of just learning in the moment. And it was very stressful and very overwhelming at times, but it was also one of the coolest things that we've gotten to be a part of. And the Ring of Honor six-man tag team division is something that not a lot of other companies have. Like, not a lot of other companies have six-man tag team titles, and I think that it's one of the most special things that ROH has to offer. So I would definitely like to see it become more of a focal point moving forward, and I think it actually is. So I'm very happy to see that.
And one of the things that I like is that obviously your new cheeseburger is sort of at the helm and he's the veteran. You and
Mhm.
Eli are the new kids on the block, for lack of a better word,
Yep.
in this circumstance. And obviously, as a team, you're going up against a lot of veterans and a lot of different people who've been around and a lot of
Mhm.
mixtures and a lot of teams that have, a track record of doing well. And you lost to some of them, but you also beat some of them. And I
Mhm.
felt that throughout this entire I guess, all the work that you put in, you were really building credibility in wrestling. And that even when you lost, you won like four in a row, and then you lost two, and you won another four in a row.
Mhm.
Now you're building a lot of credibility. You're building a lot of, progress. And now you're building the fact that you belong. So what was that like in that realm? And obviously you beat Dalton Castle and the boys. That's a big, win right there. And
Mhm.
obviously you had different matches with a bunch of different people. I think you had a victory over Coast to Coast in one of those matches that you were with
Mhm.
them. And so that's another big victory. And so what was that like, that you're actually building progress up and that you're almost earning your position in this division? You're saying, hey, we're here to stay. And that just because we're new doesn't mean that you can overlook us.
Yeah, and I like the way that you phrased it as in we were trying to establish ourselves, we were trying to prove that we belonged there because that was really our goal the entire time that we were doing that we had that tenure as a team because each one of us had something to prove, right? Like you said, Eli and I were the two relatively new kids on the block, so we had to prove that we could deliver the goods and that we belonged in this company with some of these seasoned veterans who had been doing this for a long time, and he and I hadn't been. So we really had to prove that even though we were just young kids who were relatively inexperienced, that we could be thrown into the fire and that we could be relied upon to deliver with those other guys, that we could hang with them. But the same could be said for Berger too, is that he also had something to prove because Berger he was also trying to prove that he's Cheeseburger, but he's not just a novelty act. You know what I mean? He's also a veteran. He's been a part of all these cool moments, wrestling in the Tokyo Dome, tag teaming with Jushin Thunder Liger, wrestling at Madison Square Garden. So Berger also had a chip on his shoulder a little bit, I would say, in that he wanted to also prove to people, it's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm Cheeseburger, and yeah, I'm the underdog, but you know what? I'm a veteran. I can go out there and I can hang with all these people too, and I'm going to prove it as well. And I think that that was also something that was on his mind. So I think it worked so well because we all had a chip on our shoulder and we all had something to prove. And I think that's why we kind of fed off of each other so well.
And even going further, you and Cheeseburger had a bunch of tag team matches without Eli.
Hmm.
And what was that like, going from being a trios to doing just regular tag team wrestling? Because it is a bit of a shift,
Hmm.
and obviously you're close with the other two guys. You're close with the guy, you're close with Cheeseburger.
Hmm.
But what was that like, not having your third member in certain matches? around you and backing you up, and even the style of it. Because a regular tag team match, as I stated before, it's very different than a trios tag team match.
Hmm. Like you said, it was very different, and at times it was a little bit jarring because sometimes there would be a sudden shift, and one member would be going off and kind of doing something different from the other two. But my vision for the Shinobi Shadow Squad from day one was always that I wanted us to be the most versatile team that Ring of Honor had to offer. I wanted us to be able to wrestle six-man tag team matches, but then any combination of the two of us could go and wrestle a tag team match. And then, hey, any one of us could go off on our own for a little bit and start chasing maybe singles gold. So I wanted us to be able to be plugged into literally any spot in the Ring of Honor landscape because I thought that's how we would optimize ourselves for the biggest possibility of success as a team and as individuals. So, like you said, at times, you know, Eli had done all these cool things like pinning Christopher Daniels in Hammerstein Ballroom. He then wrestled Kenny King at Final Battle on pay per view. So it was obvious that, Eli's star was on the rise and the sky was the limit for him and he was going up, 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 up. And rightfully so, he was getting some of these singles opportunities as a result. So sometimes Berger and I would be left to represent the team. And we did do that a few different times, wrestling, the bouncers, wrestling coast to coast, wrestling SOS as well. And I always wanted to look at it as even if it's not the three of us together, we're still there for each other. We're still supporting each other. We still have each other's backs. Eli could be off doing a singles match, or Berger could be, and the other two of us could be tag teaming, but we would still be a unit. We would still be friends. We would still be brothers. There would still be that bond between us that would never break. So, yeah, it was a little weird sometimes going right from six-man tag team action to one of us being in a singles and the other two being in tag team. But I was just so happy that we were still there. We were still making our mark in Ring of Honor, even if it wasn't always standing right next to each other every time.
Yeah, and even to go further off of this, because I'm going to dive into some single stuff that you've done in Ring of Honor, and then there's two people I want to talk about in a second here, but I do want to mention that you were also on in a bunch of these Ring of Honor shows. We're in with New Japan as well, and
Mhm.
so that was a really cool position where Ring of Honor and New Japan have a relationship, and when New Japan comes to America, they do combo shows with Ring of Honor. And
Mhm.
so, what
Yep.
was that like, especially going into things like Final Battle and things of that nature, where it was some New Japan talent on Ring of Honor, and obviously that got mixed into a bunch of stuff. And so, what was that like? Because that's kind of your connection to New Japan, where
Mhm.
I guess it's a double show, or they're both like co-sponsoring. I don't know what the
Mhm.
technical term is, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, where
Mhm.
two promotions team up and produce one show together.
Yeah, I mean, that was something too that I think it added an extra little layer of motivation to want to prove myself and for all three of us in our trio to want to prove ourselves because we knew that, hey, Ring of Honor and New Japan have this great relationship. They're running these joint shows. So there's this breadth of opportunity for us to maybe cross over and maybe wrestle some of this New Japan talent when they come over here to the States. And I thought that, that would also be a great opportunity for us to prove ourselves, not just prove that we belong in Ring of Honor, but prove that we could possibly hang with some of this New Japan talent. And like you said, they've run joint shows together. They did the Madison Square Garden show together, which was one of the coolest things to be a part of as being a part of the fabric of ROH and just as a wrestling fan in general to see these two promotions that aren't WWE run Madison Square Garden, something that is almost completely unheard of. And obviously they do the War of the Worlds tour, the Global Wars tours. So it was always so cool to be a part of that and be around and see all of these New Japan guys come in and to have them match up with all these Ring of Honor guys and kind of have like these dream matches that people might otherwise never thought they'd be able to see. And even we, as the Shinobi Shadow Squad, were able to be a little bit of a part of that at certain times. Like I remember one time we got to wrestle the New Japan Young Lions in a trios six-man tag team match. The guys who at the LA New Japan dojo are trained by Shibata. And I thought that was really cool because to me, that was a little Ring of Honor versus New Japan match. And that was our opportunity to go in there and say, yeah, well, you're from New Japan Pro Wrestling, and New Japan has a rich history, and it's an amazing company with an amazing set of talent. But we're here representing Ring of Honor, and we're going to show you that Ring of Honor is no slouch, and Ring of Honor can come to the table too. So it was like a friendly little bit of brand warfare every time New Japan would come do shows with ROH, which I loved because competition, I think, always breeds the best kind of wrestling and the best wrestling content. So, yeah.
And I would even add that obviously, if there's a joint show, now there's more eyes on you as
Mhm.
well. And I think that's super important in that way. And we're going to also talk about that a little bit with Camp Leapfrog. But I do want to
Mhm.
talk about two more matches. One
Mhm.
of them was against Shane Taylor, which was a singles match. I know that was early, and I know that we just went through a bunch of stuff in Ring of Honor, and then also
Mhm.
Dak Draper or Draper.
Mhm.
I don't
Mhm.
know exactly how to pronounce his name for precise.
It's Dak Draper, and I'll also correct you on that one too, because if Dak Draper heard you say that, he would deliver his catchphrase to you, and he would say "Shame on you." So I'll help you out there, so you don't get shamed by Dak Draper.
I'll be tweeting this right at this moment, just to twist the knife a little bit. But obviously, both of those matches, because Dak is killing it right now, and
Mhm.
that entire promo with Jonathan Gresham was crazy, and the pure Ring of Honor title. And I know that
Absolutely.
match was more recent than the Shane Taylor match, but
Mhm.
obviously both of those matches were really, really good. And those were single matches. So what were those like? Because both those guys are beyond talented, and getting to wrestle them is something that's super cool. And I think they're, especially Dak, is definitely one of the top talents in Ring of Honor.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about each of those, and let's start with the Shane one first, just because it's chronologically came before the Dak Draper match. The Shane Taylor match was an interesting experience for me because it was another one of those things, almost similar to that of the Cody match, where I knew I was going to be thrown in there with this guy who differently than Cody, Shane was fighting at that time to establish himself and prove to everybody in Ring of Honor especially after he and Keith Lee separated and Keith Lee went off and did his own thing. Shane was there to prove that he's not the sidekick to Keith Lee. He's going to prove to everybody that he's a staple in professional wrestling and he's going to make his mark in Ring of Honor. So he had a huge chip on his shoulder at the time, especially then. And I was just this plucky underdog kid who was thrown in there to the mix. And unfortunately, I think at the time, Shane decided that I'm going to show everybody what I'm capable of doing at the expense of Ryan Nova. So he came out there with the devil in his eyes, and I think he set his sights on me. And if I remember that match correctly, it's hard because at the end of that match, he bounced me on the top of my head, but I went for a kick. I tried to kick him in the face right out of the gate. Instead of like squaring up and tying up, because I'm like, this is Shane Taylor. I'm not going to lock up with Shane Taylor. I'm just going to go full throttle and just try and catch him by surprise and kick him in the head. And he grabbed my foot and he saw what I was doing. He caught me by surprise, and then he scooped me up and just dropped me on my head with a pile driver. And yeah, that was definitely a painful experience, but it was also a good learning experience because I it was all part of my growth and development. And like I said, I was so early on in my career that I was just kind of mesmerized by being in there with someone like Shane Taylor. But now, all this time later, I've had so much time to grow and develop, and I've changed as a human being and just matured and getting older. And now I'm at the age of 25. I was 22 then. Um, I would be interested to see what I could do now in the ring with Shane Taylor. I don't exactly think it would be the same exact result, so I would be interested in kind of seeing how that would fare if we ran
Let's
it back.
talk about that, because this is super interesting. Where
Mhm.
when I was 22, I don't say I was not mature, but I'm
Mhm.
obviously 28 now,
Yep.
and so I'm a hell of a lot more mature now as a 28-year-old. And there are things that I would not do when I was 22 that I would not things that I did when I was 22, I wouldn't do when I was 28.
Mhm.
And even just the interviewing, I've been doing this for 6 years. So obviously, I'm in a very similar position to the degree, not necessarily with wrestling, but 3 years of experience or 6 years of experience changes the way you
Mhm.
mature and approach something. And so, what was that like for you having that maturity and having that reflection, because I think, some people don't get it. I would imagine that. I know in wrestling, sometimes young people forget to check their ego at the door. Is a
Hmm.
really good example in wrestling. And obviously, I'm not going to pretend that when I was 6 years ago, when I started doing this, my ego was very different than it is now. My ego has grown, but it's also grown in a different way,
Hmm.
where I know how to fill my room with an ego versus walking in like I'm hot shit.
Hmm.
And so I'm the first person to realize that in 6 years things change. But what has that been like for you to mature in wrestling?
It's been pretty incredible just to kind of see and look back in hindsight, see how that roller coaster ride has transpired and how it's changed me for the better, in my opinion. You know, because when I was having all these matches in Ring of Honor with Cody Rhodes and Shane Taylor and all of these other guys, even if we just go back a couple years when I was doing the Shinobi Shadow Squad thing, I liken myself to that of, I was a young man, younger than I am right now, and I was just this kid who was thrown into the deep end with all of these sharks, and I was just trying to survive. I was trying to prove that I belonged in those matches, in with those opportunities. But I was also this person who, I was going into these matches, and I was starstruck by some of the people that I was with because these are guys that I had been watching on television sometimes as young as when I was a teenager, guys that I was watching in my early 20s before I started training, that these guys were superstars to me. They were all larger than life people. And I was still coming to terms with the idea that these were now my peers and these were now my coworkers. And I was trying to kind of come to terms with that while also kind of trying to carve my spot in Ring of Honor. And that's where my mindset was at the time. But now, after having gone through some of the experiences I have, and now being at the age of 25 years old, going to be 26 later this year, my mindset now is more of that I'm not just the guy that's happy to be in wrestling. I'm a wrestling fan first and foremost. I love wrestling. My passion for wrestling has only grown with all of the experiences I've had, which I'm very grateful for. But I am not somebody that's just happy to be here. It's not just enough for me to survive. I also want to thrive. And that's kind of how my mindset has changed now is I'm not just this kid with this dream of performing or wrestling under these big bright lights. I'm somebody who's very goal oriented. I have these goals for myself that I've set. I have people in my life who have believed in me from the very first moment I told them I was going to do this. And now I'm putting in the work to say, I'm going to reward those people and show them that it wasn't a waste of time for them to invest in me. So that's kind of just to tell you how my priorities have shifted from the beginning to where I'm at right now.
And it's important, it's important that I think people understand that priorities shift, ideas shift,
Hmm.
things need to shift, and it's super important. Believe me, my priorities have shifted too in a lot of ways with what I'm doing, and even the goal and the mission of what I'm interested in doing at the moment has shifted tremendously in the last year. I mean,
Hmm.
as of 3 days ago, March 25th was my first 1 year cycle into doing this entire show, and it was
Hmm.
130 interviews and
Wow.
a lot in a year, a
Yeah,
lot in a
that's a
year.
lot to do.
And then it's terrifying, and I don't even know how I got here, but I digress. And then let's talk about Dak, because
Hmm.
that's a whole interesting circumstance as well, because that
Yeah.
guy's a monster and he's a beast, and he's the whole package. And getting to
Hmm.
wrestle him had to make you better, because it's the idea that iron sharpens iron.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I like the way that you liken Dak Draper to that of a monster because the guy is 6'5". He's built like a brick wall, and he hits twice as hard as a brick wall would if you were to smack right into one. I liken being hit by Dak Draper to kind of being hit by a semi truck. It stings a little bit differently than just getting hit by somebody else. But yeah, I agree with you a lot. Dak Draper. The thing about that match that is really important to my development and my story is that he's somebody who, when Ring of Honor relaunched the dojo, they closed up shop in Bristol at the original Ring of Honor dojo, and they reopened it in Baltimore, where Sinclair is based out of. And Dak Draper was one of the guys, one of the first guys of that first crop of students who showed up at the new Baltimore dojo, and deservedly so. Dak Draper is a tremendous talent. He is somebody that I personally, outside of the ring, I like him. He's been very cordial to me, very decent to me. But that match is very interesting because it's almost a case of original Ring of Honor dojo versus new Ring of Honor dojo. Because obviously I'm a part of Cheeseburger School now, which is the worldwide dojo, obviously the former Ring of Honor dojo. But going into that match, there were so many things swirling around in my mind was that I'm representing Cheeseburger School here against somebody from the Baltimore School, and I have to show up and I have to show out because I have to prove that Burger's School it belongs in the same conversation with some place like the Ring of Honor dojo, which I'm not saying that to blow smoke. I truly believe that just based on the quality of teaching that Berger has instilled at that school. So I was representing Berger's school against Dak Draper's school, but also, I was in the Shinobi Shadow Squad, and this is one of those situations where we had to be able to prove ourselves outside of the team and be able to stand on our own because we had to prove our worth in this company. And this was the opportunity I had. I was going to wrestle Dak Draper on TV. I think we were doing a tour of Pittsburgh and Columbus that weekend. And I was told I was going to go in there and wrestle him. I was going to have to do it on my own. And I went out there and I went full throttle. I held nothing back and I came up short. But I don't regret anything that went into that match. I don't regret any of what I put into that match because I know I gave it everything that I had then. But I do know at the same time that if I were to run it back with Dak Draper now, I have much more in the tank to give now, being a little bit older, being a little bit more wiser, being the best that I've ever been in wrestling to this point. If Dak Draper and I were to tear it up again, I think the outcome would be a little bit different.
Well, never say never is the saying in wrestling and in
Mm-hmm.
life, and I've learned never say never. So who knows what 2021 and 2022 is gonna present? And now I really want to dive into Camp Leapfrog
Let's do it.
because this is how I found you first and
Mm-hmm.
foremost is through Camp Leapfrog, and obviously Camp Leapfrog, in my opinion, is the best thing that came out of COVID and 2020. And I know that's a bold statement to make, and I'm willing to defend that statement on a lot of reasons. So, how did you get into Camp Leapfrog? Because the concept of Camp Leapfrog is beyond unique. Obviously, there is some shady history. I believe we're all adults. Chikara had issues. A bunch of stuff
Mm-hmm.
was not working, and Camp Leapfrog was built out of 2, 3 promotions, not closing. Big component is Chikara. I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody can acknowledge that. I think we all can be adults in the room when we talk about that.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously COVID hit, and then, well, I think Chris and a bunch of other people sort of pieced it together. I know AG had a piece in it as well before he
Mm-hmm.
moved on to greener passages. See what I did there, everybody? See what I did there?
Yeah, that was a good
I've,
one. I like it.
I've been waiting to use that one for a while. Hi, my name is Danger Kid also. In case you didn't know, but I've been waiting to use that one too for a while. So anyhow, how did you get invited into it? Because it is a unique circumstance and it is a very unique promotion, high tension. Obviously, is sort of behind it as well.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that, but I want to talk just a little bit about what you said that I think it's so awesome and so amazing that all of these people were able to come together and create something so special, create this little home away from home for a lot of these other wrestlers, including myself too. And out of tragedy comes opportunity, and all of these people involved, like you said, Chris, we're talking about Sam Laterna, we're talking about every single person involved with it. I can't name all of them because I would end up leaving somebody out, which I don't want to do. But they were able to take all of these negative circumstances and create something so special, create this home that we could all go to, this inclusive environment where we could create wrestling for everybody, for any kind of fan that's out there. And I think that's what's so special about Camp Leapfrog is that it's all inclusive and it's for anybody.
I
Anybody can watch it
also
and find
I
something.
also feel like it's the first one was Wet Hot American Summer. It was
Hmm.
really that vibe. And Wet Hot American Summer, while it is a rated R movie, And
Mhm.
Camp Leapfrog, I think, is PG-13 for the most part. I think,
Mhm.
if you're PG-13, I would feel pretty comfortable letting, somebody 13 watch it. I think it's pretty reasonable, meaning that's where I put it, where that's the level, because it's not ultra violent and it's for everybody. But it's even
Mhm.
that vibe that it's just fun, and that it's
Mhm.
that type of thing, and it's meant for everybody. And I think everybody can find something in Camp Leapfrog, whether you like the entire thing or half the thing or two or three matches. It's an amazing concept. So
Mhm.
I love the fact that they did it, and Chris said it perfectly. He said it's the type of thing that you could light up, a joint and watch with your friends and be perfectly cool with it and enjoy it. And he said that a few hours before it was airing, because I actually got to interview Chris, and we were
Mhm.
speaking about Camp Leapfrog and a variety of other stuff. And legitimately, it was his interview right before, it was his last interview right before it premiered, which was awesome. So, having said all that, how did you get involved? Because it is amazing what they've done. And then I
Mhm.
make this argument saying this is the best thing that's come out of 2020 in wrestling, and
Mhm.
maybe out of all of 2020 to some degree, which I know that's a bold statement. And again, I'm willing to defend that statement for a long time at this point.
Yeah, and I don't think that you're off base in the slightest at all. I think that obviously 2020 was a very tough, very grueling year for all of us. Maybe some more so than others, but all of us experienced some kind of negative impact or some kind of loss as a result of 2020. And Camp Leapfrog, especially in wrestling, was one of those little glimmers of light in what was otherwise a very dark year for a lot of people. And I think that's what's so special about it is what it gave back to all of us, what it gave back to wrestling. But how I got involved in it essentially is obviously earlier that year, the COVID-19 pandemic had kind of kicked into full swing. We were going into that lockdown period. Ring of Honor went on hiatus for a long time. There was no Ring of Honor content being filmed. So, I was really kind of almost out in the cold. There was nothing for me to do. And I had this mindset where I was like, I can either let this break me and like destroy my motivation, or I can really try and get that fire raging under my butt and really just try and put even more work in to get ready for when things come back. And that's what I had been doing. So I was going to the Worldwide Dojo all the time. I was working out. I was just trying to put all the work in the ring, outside of the ring, in a safe way, of course. But that's what my goal was to just come back bigger, better than ever before. And I had seen what Camp Leapfrog was doing because I had, through my friends who were participating on the show, such as Berger, I saw what they were doing with the content that they were creating, and I thought it was just so fun. I thought it was quirky. I thought it was out there, but in a good way, in a fun way. It made wrestling fun again. Didn't take itself too seriously. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting. I would really like to be a part of that at some point if I could. At that point, I still wasn't wrestling full time again, though, because I was really paranoid about COVID, more so than right now. There was no sight of a vaccine at all at that point in time. My parents are also immunocompromised, so I was very hesitant to get back out there and to kind of put myself at risk because of them. Um, and it just so happened that in October, Camp Leapfrog was going to run another show. They were going to do their Halloween special. And, I was just kind of sitting at home, not really doing anything, not even planning on getting back into wrestling at that point. And I'll give credit to this person specifically, but two people actually. Chris Levin is the one who reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in coming to Camp Leapfrog and being a part of it for the opening open swim match. And also, to his credit, too, Cheeseburger is another person who put my name in the hat for Chris to even consider putting me in that role. I'm very grateful to both of them. Both of them have always been very supportive of me, and I consider both of them close friends. But Chris asked me, "Are you interested in doing this?" And I thought about it for a second, and I was like, I miss wrestling so much, and I would give anything just to, for one day, even if it was just one time, come back into it and get that feeling of community and feel what it's like to get that rush of being a part of something special like this. So I said, yes, I'll do it. We obviously had to get COVID tested before going to those shows, which I think is extremely important. Camp Leapfrog takes all those safety precautions and does everything that it can to keep everybody safe which I'm very appreciative of. But I went there and I was just taken aback by the feeling of community and friendship and camaraderie that Camp Leapfrog had created. And I knew that day that I was going to be a part of something special, something in my mind that's even revolutionary for indie wrestling. And after that, I got invited to come back. And now I feel like I'm in the fold with it. And I feel grateful that they gave me a place to come to get back into wrestling and reignite my passion for it, and allowed me to become part of their family. And I am so grateful to them. I will eternally be grateful to them for that. And I will always feel at home at Camp Leapfrog because of it.
And so let's talk about the match because this match was fun. Obviously, I think this was the first match that you were part of was the Fatal Four Way Loser Wears a Chicken Suit match, and that's
Yep.
straight out of Impact. And for those who don't
Hmm.
know, Chris, I think in at least three of those matches that were in Impact was the ref.
Hmm.
And I don't even know if the chicken suit is the Impact chicken suit that like AJ Styles wore and Eric Young wore it once.
Hmm.
And so I don't know if it's the same one. It looks similar. I will say that, but it's even that idea. And obviously, I think anybody who knows wrestling knows that entire concept and the entire theory of that match. And Impact was like the Thanksgiving turkey match. And so, what was that entire thing going into it? It's obviously like Halloween and it's
Hmm.
fun. And obviously, you lost the match, but even still, that entire spot was just perfect across it. And
Hmm.
the evil still life with apricot and pears. She's evil. She should
Hmm.
not have pinned you. It was a cheat, and
Hmm.
I love Still Life, and Still Life is amazing, and I can't wait to see what Still Life does tonight. It's
Hmm.
gonna be fun what she does tonight in the Cassandra Cup. But even still, for this purpose, she's evil, and you
Hmm.
need a rematch.
Well, anybody who pins Ryan Nova in any way, shape, or form on any wrestling show is evil and should be treated as such. But outside of that, I'm willing to let it slide one time because I will say that if I had to get beaten, getting beaten by someone like Still Life with apricots and pears, of course, I'm willing to take that. I'm willing to settle for that because Still Life is an amazing wrestler. She is an amazing athlete, and I feel, on a side note, really impressed by her ability to evolve and grow into now. I believe she's referred to herself as Edith Surreal is her rebranded name. So great for her, great on her. But I kind of wanted to tell this story for a while, and I'm glad that I've gotten the platform to do it. But the chicken suit idea was actually something for that show that I came up with personally, because I knew it was Halloween, and Chris and everybody was saying, make sure to come and bring a Halloween costume. And I was looking all over the place. I mean, I haven't celebrated like Halloween by wearing a costume in many, many years. So I'm looking, I'm telling you, I'm looking in my closet and I'm like, what can I wear? What can I wear? And I'm like, there's this chicken suit that I had that I wore probably when I was in like middle school for Halloween or whatever. And God knows why I wanted to be a chicken for Halloween when I could be literally anything else. But besides the point, I texted Chris and I said, how do you feel about us doing? And I knew that Chris had been the Impact referee. So I thought that it was a perfect way to set this up. So I said, how about for this fatal four way? Loser has to wear this chicken suit. And I was like, that'll be my contribution to Camp Leapfrog for this. You'll get me in a chicken suit, and I'll wear this as the Halloween costume afterwards. If I lose, of course, only if I lose, which I did, unfortunately. And Chris loved the idea. So that's how the idea kind of came about. Is I was like, oh, it's perfect because Chris was from Impact. He's done this before. We gotta need a whole Halloween gimmick here. Put something on the line where the loser has to wear a chicken suit. It gives the match a little bit more stakes. And yeah, that's how I kind of together put the idea together. But it was on Chris and everybody else at Camp Leapfrog to make it come to life, which they did, and I'm very happy that they were able to.
Yeah, and I thought it was a great spot, and I thought that it actually meant something. Obviously, you're coming in and you're the heel too, which only added more to it. And I just thought it was a
Mhm.
great opening because the second that match happened, I knew for a fact that it was this is going to be a good show. But I think it set the entire tone of it. And then obviously later on, you were also part of the Monsters, I guess, Battle Royale and that
Mhm.
entire
Oh
match,
yes.
and that was crazy in of itself, and obviously it had a very cinematic feel to it. We had a bunch of like werewolf stuff going on. Legitly, everybody in Camp
Yep.
Leapfrog was somehow involved in that match, and your nemesis might have won that match, Kaya McKenna, and so
Mm.
that was very very interesting, that entire match. But what was that like, having legitimately everybody in that match?
So, I mean, it was definitely a weird experience because, it was a huge like battle royal type experience. Everybody was in it. We were running on this Halloween, theme, and I had to wrestle that match in a chicken suit, which, it was weird enough just wearing a chicken suit after losing that first match, but then I had to actually try to wrestle in a chicken suit. And it was one of the most difficult things that I'd ever had to do because the chicken suit is so big and encumbering, and it's got these huge wing flaps on the sides, like almost like a gliding suit. I could probably jump off a mountain and glide all the way to safety wearing that chicken suit because it's just so big, and it's like, I'm wearing like a parachute basically while I'm wearing it. So I was trying to figure out how the hell am I going to move around like in this suit, and I was like, all right, just try and make it like as efficient as possible, keep all of my movements succinct, and just try and make it that I don't have to move all that much. And thankfully, Big Calix ended up throwing me out when I tried to do a, flying crossbody off the top rope onto Calix, and tossed me over the top rope. So I didn't have to wear the chicken suit for too long. So Calix kind of saved me inadvertently from the shame of having to wear it. So I'm disappointed I didn't win the match, but at least I got to take the chicken suit off faster. And it was hot that day too. So I was definitely sweating up a storm in that. So happy to get it off.
And then obviously, even going further off of this, you talk about Christmas time. You
Mhm.
were in Christmas trios, and obviously you
Mhm.
were against Boomer Hatfield, Molly McCoy, Still Life with Apricots and Pears, or Edith Surreal now, for
Mhm.
those who, she has rebranded herself. And you were teaming up with Big Game Leroy, Bones, and obviously you were in the match as well.
Mhm.
And that was kind of crazy what was going on, because you were having some friction with Leroy
Mhm.
apparently, and
Mhm.
I don't know if you're a gamer. That might be the issue.
Mhm. Well, look, I like a good video game just as much as anybody else, but playing video games and while wrestling, it's just not the appropriate time to be doing something like that. And that's what I was trying to impress upon Leroy. I was like, I don't know if you realize this about me, but I'm a trio expert. I've been doing the trio thing for a long time. I don't know if you know the Shinobi Shadow Squad or not, Leroy, but it's kind of a big deal. I'm kind of a big deal. So just let me handle everything here. And he's playing his game, and he's not focusing on winning the trios tournament. So I have to kind of corral him, and I'm obviously the leader of the team because Bones is just completely off his rocker. I have no idea what the hell he's talking about. And Leroy's distracted. So I'm the obvious leader of the team. And I'm trying to get Leroy to just pay attention and focus on this. And he's just too busy playing his Switch. I don't know what he's playing on there. Maybe Zelda Breath of the Wild or something like that. But go play that on your own time, all right? You're about to cost me a trios tournament win. And that's just unacceptable. And as it turned out, because Leroy got distracted, I ended up losing the match for us. So really, Leroy lost the match, but officially, I was the one that lost. And maybe someday Leroy will finally listen to me, and maybe I'll finally be able to get him to see the light and to put the video games down a little bit during those matches. But it was a crazy experience, but uh, it was a fun experience nonetheless. It would have been more fun if I had won the tournament, though. Just saying.
But even going further off of that, what was it like to be in a trios
Mm-hmm.
tournament? Obviously, Camp Leapfrog does it their way. It's Christmas time, and this was really cool, and it was a special show in many ways, where
Mm-hmm.
it was awesome just to have that idea of Christmas trios. And obviously, Ring of Honor does it. Jakara does trio stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
for that to be back with a bunch of those people that are familiar with it, that probably wouldn't get it again for a while, and having
Mm-hmm.
that entire thing, and then also you being back in a trios match
Mm-hmm.
as well, must have been really cool. And then obviously it's on IWTV, and there's a lot of eyes on IWTV.
Yeah. And the thing that's really important to note about Christmas trios, and Chris would attested to this and told us about this at the time, and I thought it was obviously rang very true. But this was the opportunity on that show that we all had to go out there, and this was the first time that we had spent the holidays in this setting, this pandemic setting, where a lot of people weren't able to go and spend time with their families and their loved ones and the people that they really cared about. So for a lot of people this year, Christmas was going to be a very lonely holiday. And we had the opportunity to go out there and really create something special, an escape for people to watch and really get into the Christmas spirit and maybe not feel so alone this holiday season. That was the gift that we were trying to give to people. And I think that's what made Christmas Trios so special, above all else. Even regardless of the fact that we had such a talented roster of people out there, just giving it everything they had, holding nothing back. But the meaning and the message behind Christmas Trios, I think, is what made it as special as it was. And I, on a very personal level, am so happy to have been a part of that and hopefully bring a little bit of joy to people that holiday season. And like you said, it was cool for me to be back in a trio. Even before that had happened, we had pitched the idea of bringing the Shinobi Shadow Squad back for that one Christmas trio event, to kind of cap off our tenure as a team because we didn't really have our last big blow off match. But that didn't happen that way. I got to have a cool experience teaming with two people I had never teamed with before. But the most important thing was the fact that we went out there and we created something special for people to latch onto and hopefully have a good holiday season watching Camp Leapfrog.
I would even extend that to some degree to Camp Leapfrog as well,
Mhm.
where clearly, COVID, the vaccination is now rolling out, but we all know, and I think it's safe to say that, and I'm a big comic guy, so San Diego Comic Con
Mhm.
2021 is canceled
Yeah.
slash rescheduled slash virtual, and that should give an idea of where I think things are going. Obviously, I interview a lot of people, and everybody has a different position. I know people down in Florida and South Carolina are going to conventions, and I'm in the camp of that there's going to be August, September, November, October surprises.
Hmm.
And I don't say that to scare anybody, but I say it because I've been pessimistic, which means I'm always right eventually. But I would extend the idea with even Camp Love Frog, where
Hmm.
you can't necessarily now go out to a restaurant either with your significant other or meet
Hmm.
somebody or go out on your first date. But this is also giving an opportunity for people
Hmm.
to have something to celebrate with somebody and sort of make an event out of it and take a bad circumstance and make it a little less bad. And obviously, Camp Leapfrog and Camp Love Frog and Christmas Trios, all that stuff makes things a little less bad and makes it enjoyable, and they're fun shows. And I think that's something that is super important to realize, that especially during COVID. So I would even extend that position to Camp Love Frog as well. Not to the same degree, because Christmas is obviously a much higher holiday. But if we're going to rank holidays, and I hate to rank holidays,
Hmm.
but even
Sure.
still having that position, I think was super, super important in that regard as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point. We can even extend it to the meaning and the message behind Camp Love Frog, and I think that we've talked about it earlier in the show, but I think it's important to just reiterate the fact that we need to commend Camp Leapfrog for going above and beyond to provide these shows, give the people out there who are watching this on IWTV, give them an escape because they're not able to celebrate Christmas, they're not able to celebrate Valentine's Day in the traditional way that you would like to. But with Camp Love Frog, we tried to create an event that would still somehow, some way spread the love out there into the universe and out there into the wrestling community. And I think that we successfully did that. I think that Camp Leapfrog, even though it's something that is so early on in its tenure in the wrestling world, I think has already found an amazing way to connect with people on a very personal and human level. And we're able to provide people with not just entertainment, but provide people with release from some of the bad stuff that's going on in their lives. And I think that that's truly something unique and special.
And also, and this kind of leads into what Camp Leapfrog is doing and the entire idea of cinematic wrestling.
Hmm.
So obviously, Undertaker versus AJ Styles was the first cinematic match.
Yeah.
Bray Wyatt versus John Cena was the second. AEW really did the third
Hmm.
to some degree. I think officially, I mean, WWE Money in the Bank. I'm not too sure which one came first, but obviously, then AEW took that to a whole new level with cinematic wrestling. And then
Hmm.
fast forward to Camp Leapfrog, they've taken that entire concept and have adjusted it. And one of the things that they've done is that they've sort of they've done it in two ways where Camp Leapfrog has had cinematic matches and things of that nature that are actually wrestling matches that we've seen. But then we've also seen the entire cinematic story universe being built. And
Hmm.
you and Kaya, hopefully she won't curse you or me in
Oh
this
God, please no.
got enough problems, as I said. But you were sort of on a blind date with each other at Camp
Hmm.
Love Frog, and
Yeah.
then you didn't have your wallet, or she didn't have her wallet, and then you had a match to figure out who would pay for it. And
Yes.
so this entire thing sets up a story where it sets up a unique story that okay, who's paying for dinner on this date?
Hmm.
Who's going to take care of it? Obviously, you were more the heel and she was more the face. But
Yep.
it's this entire thing now we have a story of where this
Hmm.
is going. And so now we have a match that actually has a meaningful story
Hmm.
in it to some degree. And obviously now I'm interested because I'm like, okay, who's going to pay for what? And how is this issue going to be settled?
Hmm.
And where are we going with it? So what was that entire like? Just going even beyond the match because this that match actually meant something. It had actually some
Hmm.
caliber to it. It wasn't just a one-off match. It was
Hmm.
now, hey, there is a consequence for this match.
Yeah. And that was something that the idea came up because I had seen that Camp Love Frog's other matches had some kind of stakes to them too. Like for example, the scramble match was a scramble match for a date where the winner would win a Valentine's Day date. And I saw that's really cool. It gives a match with 5 or 6 people. It gives it stakes and it gives them all a reason to fight their hearts out for whatever the prize is going to be. I was like, I want my match to have something like that. Why am I just wrestling Kaya McKenna like on Valentine's Day? There's got to be a reason. So we're on the blind date, and then we come up with the idea collectively that what we should do? We should make it that I don't have my wallet and I can't pay for the food, but you don't want to pay, obviously, because, I'm a jerk and you're not going to pay. Why are you going to pay for this experience? So you challenge me to this match. We'll duke it out, and whoever wins is going to pay for dinner. And unfortunately, I lost the match. I think undeservedly so because Kaya McKenna kind of hexed me or something along the lines in that match, lightning bolts shooting out of my body and some such or other. So I don't know exactly how fair that was, but I lost, and then I was then made to pay for dinner, which was awkward because I still didn't have my wallet on me. I mean, I told her it was in the interest of full disclosure and full transparency. I did not bring my wallet, so can you please just cover this? But somehow I had to. I wrote an IOU, and then I had to go back, find my wallet, and then pay for dinner later on. Um, but yeah, that match was really fun match overall, just to kind of get in there and duke it out with Kaya McKenna. To do the intergender thing was really fun because that's not a lot of stuff. It's not, I have not had a lot of experience with intergender wrestling for most of my career, and especially not for Ring of Honor. It's not something that they really are involved in. But Camp Leapfrog is another special place where a man and a woman can duke it out and can fight each other on equal footing, and it can be entertaining. I liken Camp Leapfrog almost, when I think about it, to a lighter successor to like Lucha Underground in a way, because Lucha Underground kind of has some of the same tropes and styles that you were talking about with cinematic matches, um, characters, zany, wacky characters, crazy storylines, all characters having a motivation, every match having meaning and stakes. So I kind of think that Camp Leapfrog, it's in a way, it's a little bit reminiscent of Lucha Underground, and I think we kind of carry a little bit of that spirit with us when we do all of our Camp Leapfrog shows.
Yeah, I think that there's this idea that, and I made this argument before, where you have to suspend belief.
Hmm.
So I'm a big comic reader, and I know I've said it a bunch of times, but the
Hmm.
second I suspend belief and I say, okay, Gotham is real,
Yep.
and everything in Gotham City is real, and that
Mhm.
we could have a Playboy billionaire dressed in a bat suit with all this really cool technology who
Mhm.
sleeps for 3 hours, and all of a sudden, when I believe into that, everything else makes sense.
Yeah.
And so you have to get past that first position of believing into something and sort of suspending a few beliefs or buying into the rules. And so the way
Mhm.
I view Camp Leapfrog is that if I buy into the rules of what Camp Leapfrog is, then everything else makes sense. Versus if I come in from a WWE mindset and I'm following WWE's rules that they set
Yep.
up, Camp Leapfrog doesn't work. But if I say, hey, okay, these are Camp Leapfrog's rules and this is their universe, everything makes sense within it. And so that's how I view Camp Leapfrog is that, and that doesn't mean you can't watch WWE or AEW, anything of
Sure.
that nature, but you have to understand, okay, I got to shift the rules a little bit. It's kind of like you could read DC and you could
Mhm.
read Marvel.
Yeah.
Just because you read DC doesn't mean Marvel's universe is wrong either,
Mhm.
or vice versa. So that's how I view Camp Leapfrog.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very apt comparison, the whole DC to Marvel thing. Both of them very different. Sometimes one of them over the other is a little bit more grounded and rooted more in reality-based constructs than the other. But both of them also have room and make room for all the wacky, crazy zaniness that you would want in a comic book as well. There's a lot of room for variety in comic books, in movies, and television. So why shouldn't there be room for a lot of variety in wrestling? I think that's what Camp Leapfrog is bringing. Camp Leapfrog is bringing something different. Camp Leapfrog is bringing the variety. You have the household names, the WWE, the AEW now, New Japan, Ring of Honor. A lot of them, some of them sports entertainment oriented, some of them more sports oriented in nature. And then you have Camp Leapfrog, which is, I think, a really delightful, wonderful mix of wrestling, crazy comic book zaniness, and sometimes sports oriented content as well. So I think that there's room for a lot of variety in wrestling, and Camp Leapfrog is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, no, I love it, and I think it, as I stated before, I think it's the best thing that's come out of 2020. And I think that what would I want is I almost want like a bi-monthly show out of Camp Leapfrog, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that it should be done. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the biggest mistake. If there's one criticism, I'm going to openly say it is that there's something special about Camp Leapfrog, and it should not be monthly. It should be twice a
Mm-hmm.
month. And I think the demand for it is there. And I think that it would be amazing. And then after doing that and doing 25 shows, I think you should do 50 shows. Seriously, like I think that's Chris's biggest mistake is because this is gold. And it's clear to me that this is something that people want, and people want
Mm-hmm.
it weekly. They don't want it monthly. They don't want it every 6 weeks. They don't want those Facebook hour shows. They want like a 2 hour show every single week. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that this is something that is massively special and has such a big fan base. And I
Mm-hmm.
know for a fact that at least twice a month I would tune in for it on a Sunday night.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I watched this over NXT's show,
Mm-hmm.
Camp Love Rock, because I thought it was a better product.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and I think a lot of people did as well, especially because it was just a better product. But
Mm-hmm.
I digress right there because I do want to talk about COVID and wrestling and everything in between. And I know I'm missing some
Mm-hmm.
stuff here, so we're gonna have to obviously do another interview at some point.
Hey, I'd come back any single time. This has been a fun conversation. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Now we're going to get to the unfun stuff. So obviously, as I sort of stated, San Diego Comic Con's not happening in
Mm-hmm.
2021. It didn't happen in 2020.
Yeah.
I believe vaccinations are rolling out, but there's a lot of questions, and I think it's a safe assumption to say, and this isn't political, this isn't an anti-vaccination position, but obviously, I my first availability to get vaccinated will be in May 1st. I'm in that group where it's
Mm-hmm.
going to take a while. My parents are getting their second shot on April 4th. So my parents are significantly older. They are 30 plus years my senior.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's going to be a while before I get my vaccination
Yeah.
because I'm not in that group that's allowed to get it earlier. So obviously it's going to take a while to get vaccinated for most people. And obviously I am curious because I'm not in the wrestling world. I'm in the comic world San
Mhm.
Diego Comic Con, which is a big convention. I know it's the sort of outlier when you're dealing with 100,000 people versus 1,000 people,
Mhm.
but I think it's a sign of what's to happen and where people are at. And even some of these big Comic Cons are saying, hey, we're going to run in August, and I think there's going to be rude awakenings. And I
Mhm.
know wrestling shows are doing fanless shows and things of that nature. So where do you think wrestling is going? Because I know Camp Leapfrog, all the wrestlers are fans and it's
Mhm.
cinematic and it's no fans there. I don't know what Ring of Honor is doing if they're having fans. I know WrestleMania this year is, having very limited fans,
Mhm.
very much probably like the Super Bowl to some degree.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's a shift in how things are done. I know Blitzkrieg Wrestling, which I'm sponsoring one of their wrestlers, is running on May 7th, and they're only doing 100 fans in the audience,
Mhm.
which is significantly reduced. So, obviously, where do you think all wrestling is going
Mhm.
during COVID, and when do you think things are going to open up if they ever go back to normal?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really tough question to answer just because who knows what could happen tomorrow. I mean, if anything if this whole 2020, 2021 COVID pandemic time period has taught us, it's that anything, the unexpected can and will happen. You never know what's going to come right around the corner. I mean, we never thought we would be in this pandemic situation to begin with. I certainly never thought in my lifetime I would ever experience anything like this. We also never thought there would be an effective and efficacious vaccine within a 1 year time period. That's another crazy turn of events that is almost unfounded to believe or to accept it actually happened. And wrestling is, I don't think wrestling is going to be any different than any kind of any entertainment. I think that, like you said, when all of those promotions talk about, well, we're going to try and run with fans by this date, or we're going to try and do this by then, I think it's more of like a hope rather than an expectation in almost all of these situations. I don't think that any of these companies are actually expecting any of that to actually be set in stone and to actually be a guarantee that they'll be able to run with fans by a certain date. I think it's more like we're hoping that by then this will be possible. And I think that hope is something that's very important in this very uncertain time. You know, we have to have hope that things will eventually get back to normal, even if it's a little bit further a ways down the road. I think that right now, a lot of these companies, a lot of these promotions have really done a good job of adapting their structure and their format to really provide entertaining content without fans in attendance for a lot of these shows. For example, WWE is trying to do that right now with the Thunderdome idea. NXT has their own little version of the Thunderdome kind of underground fighting structure that they've set up. AEW has limited amounts of fans. Ring of Honor does the bubble, where there are no fans in attendance. It's all just filmed, taped content within that controlled environment. So I think personally that wrestling has done a really good job of adapting to not being able to have fans in attendance. Obviously, I wish that fans could be there to so that we could all feed off the energy of the crowd, because I think we all put our best foot forward and we all give it as much as we possibly can whenever we know that there are eyes watching us in attendance. Um, but I think that safety obviously is important first and foremost. So if we can't have fans back in the building anytime soon, then I think that we have a sustainable model. Wrestling as a whole has a sustainable model for continuing to churn out content and entertainment in a safe and controlled environment, which I think is important first and foremost.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that because I think the future, and I hope this is what it looks like. Because for me, this would be great. Is that I'm hoping more shows get on the internet. I'm hoping Ring of Honor is more distributed on the internet, and that
Mhm.
it's more accessible and that it's cheaper. Because I think that that's the key too. Is that I wish that AEW was more accessible on the internet. I
Mhm.
wish that AEW Dark is great because
Mhm.
it's free on YouTube. But I
Yeah.
wish AEW Dynamite was cheaper and I could buy almost a monthly pass for $15 to
Mhm.
watch AEW Dynamite. I
Mhm.
wish I could do the same thing with Monday Night Raw. And like obviously IWTV is very accessible for
Mhm.
the fact that it's $10 or it's $100 a year. It's very cheap. and then things of that nature. And so what I'm hoping is that more content just gets filmed or gets live streamed or gets released at a later date.
Mhm.
And even when we do go back to normal, I honestly hope that's the case. I mean, I watch things from St. Louis, and St. Louis Anarchy. That's not anywhere near where I live in Connecticut. So
Right.
I think my point is that, like, though, that I'm a big fan of their work and that promotion, and they do maybe 12 shows a year back before COVID, and I'm watching something that's legitimately like 600 miles away from me,
Mhm.
but I'm watching it live. And
Yeah.
so that's where I think wrestling has to go. And I think that's the adaptation, is that you have to now be in people's, on their phones and their iPads and their laptop. And I think if you're not there, even when fans come back, I don't think that's where the real money is in
Mhm.
wrestling. While fans are great and all, I think that being in, a million people's iPhones in an app is way more effective than having 18,000 fans in Madison Square Garden. Not to
Mhm.
say that we don't want fans back in MSG, but I think even for a growth perspective, I think
Mhm.
that's what needs to happen. Because isn't it better that if I don't know how many people watch Camp Leapfrog. I'm sure Chris has those numbers, but
Mhm.
let's say 40,000 people watch Camp Leapfrog. Even if Camp Leapfrog had an arena or had something of that nature, you couldn't fit 40,000 people in there. So
Mhm.
obviously, I think that, that's where I'm viewing it. And I'm obviously more in the digital space with this show and
Mhm.
my other show, and I run a third podcast, and I'm building a digital product. So that's kind of where I see everything shifting to anyway.
Yeah. I think that there's room for both, honestly. I don't think the two directly conflict with each other, and I think that they can coexist. Obviously, like you said, I think we want to someday be able to get back into those venues with the packed environment, and because the energy from that just can't be replicated in the digital space, right? But the digital space and the technology, I think utilizing that more in the future, I think is going to be a trend that we're going to see continue in wrestling. And I'm really happy about that too, because I think that now we're not going to be relying only on fans being in person. We're going to be able to rely on other forms of media and other forms of technology to branch all of these products out and get it in front of a wider audience. And I think that's just beneficial for wrestling as a whole, and that's something that I really want to see continue. I think that I'm a big proponent, I'm a big advocate for trying to find positives in the negative. And obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic, it's not something that I wish had ever happened, but I think if we can find a way to make a positive change come out of it, and I'll talk specifically for wrestling, if we can find a way to positively affect and impact wrestling going forward as a result of COVID, then I think that at least the experience will have been worthwhile to some degree for having gone through the struggles. And I think that's what we're going to see, is that even after we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, sure, we're probably going to have fans back in attendance. We're going to have these packed venues where people are going to come, and we're all going to be able to feed off this energy. But I think we're also going to see wrestling become more available to more people through all of these different technological means. And I think that the COVID pandemic is maybe inadvertently going to spur that into existence faster than it otherwise would have developed. So I think that there might be some cool things that do come out as a permanent change in wrestling afterwards that we're all going to benefit from as fans and as wrestlers.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. And on that note, I'm going to give you an opportunity to self promote yourself, because I know that you
Mhm.
have a Twitter.
Mhm.
I'm not too sure if you have a Facebook page. I
Mhm.
don't know if you have an Instagram. I'm
Mhm.
going to take a leap of faith here and assume you don't have a TikTok.
Mhm.
Obviously, where can people find your merch? Because that's a big one.
Mhm.
People need to pick up merch of their favorite wrestlers. And
Mhm.
so, where can people find you on social media? Merch, obviously, and
Mhm.
everything, and anything else you would like to promote.
Yeah, so well, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryan Nova Super. Ryan Supernova was taken, so unfortunately I couldn't grab that one in time. But yeah, follow me on Twitter at Ryan Nova Super. That's capital R, capital N, and then capital S. So follow me on Twitter. I unfortunately don't have Instagram. I don't have TikTok. I don't have a Facebook page. Cheeseburger's trying to get me to do Instagram for a while, so I might eventually cave and do that. But right now, you can follow me on Twitter. You can buy any merchandise that's associated with me by looking me up on prowrestlingtees.com. That would be the best way to find any of my 3S Shinobi Shadow Squad merchandise. And then the other thing that I'll say is for anybody out there who hasn't seen me in a while or is interested in knowing what I'm doing next, I have some stuff in the works that I unfortunately I can't say what it is. I have to keep it a little bit hush hush, but I will say that Ryan Nova is going to be doing some really cool things in the upcoming months, and I'm really excited for it. I put all of my passion and all of my energy into it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what all of you think about it for anybody that sees this. So all I'll say is keep in touch because you haven't heard the last of Ryan Nova, and there's more to come in the future.
So on that note, and I've been saying it, and I'm getting tired of saying it, so everybody just start doing it. You have to support indie wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
It is super important to support indie wrestling, support indie wrestlers, and typically, in the way that I like to encourage is buy their merch. Obviously, watch them. You know, if they're on Ring of Honor or
Mm-hmm.
IWTV, you should be watching those shows. Super important about it. Obviously, buy their merch, as I already stated, because especially in COVID, when you can't go to somebody's table and pick up their merch, buying their merch off of Pro Wrestling Tees or whatever other merch they use is super helpful, and it goes a long way because merch, for those who don't know, subsidizes income, and it
Yes.
is very, very helpful um, with wrestlers. And given that shows haven't occurred all throughout 2020, and I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's been a reduction in shows in 2021. I don't think I'm shooting in the dark here on that one. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty obvious. So obviously, that's how you should be first and foremost supporting. But I also have been saying, and it's contradictory, that if you're in a position where money is tight and that you are in that circumstance where money's tight, what you should be doing first and foremost is shoring up your assets. What that means is that make sure your rent is paid, your mortgage is paid, make sure you got food, water, electricity, make sure your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your boyfriend, your kids are okay, make sure your dog's okay, make sure you're okay. Also make sure that you have money for the next day and the next month because we don't know what's going to happen. And I've been stating this where looks like we're turning the corner, but you never know with what's going on and how things are going. So please take care of yourself financially first and foremost before you go and pick up somebody's merch. If you're in that circumstance, if you have extra money, you should absolutely be throwing it at, somebody's merch because it is super important. But if you don't have that, what you should be doing is obviously following people on Twitter. Obviously, you should be following Ryan on Twitter. It is super important. You should be engaging with him on Twitter. If he's wrestling on Ring of Honor or he's wrestling on an IWTV show, you should be tweeting at him because it is super important. It lets those promotions know that people like Ryan and that it helps to spread the word. And so you should be following people on social media, engaging with them, even if it's just like a heart or a retweet. And if you're feeling rambunctious, definitely
Mm-hmm.
comment. And look, you could say, "Oh, Ryan Nova is such a heel." That's perfectly fine on Twitter. You could boo somebody on Twitter. Technically, we would much prefer if you encourage Ryan, but I digress right there.
Mm-hmm.
But you should definitely be following people on Twitter and on social media because it does make a difference. And on that note, and after my entire encouragement, and again, everybody, I would like you to start doing it so I don't have to keep saying it. I'm going to give you the final word.
Yeah, so I just want to say those are all excellent points that you made, and I just want to say, yeah, just support wrestling, support indie wrestling in any way that is feasible for you to do so. Obviously, it's important to take care of yourself and your family first and foremost, but every little bit helps, folks. Just you can support wrestling just by watching it. If you want to support it monetarily as well, that is your choice to do so, and obviously, we would all greatly appreciate it if you did. But just outside of the wrestling bubble, I just want to say that we're in these unprecedented times right now. Things are still uncertain. We're still kind of unsure where things are headed. But I just wanted to say to everybody, please take care of yourselves, take care of your families, take care of your mental health. It's so super super important. Wash your hands, stay safe, and look after one another and be kind to one another, please, because we all need that right now in these times, and we're only going to get through this if we do it together. So.